Welcome to Reddit Recap. Don't forget to subscribe. Reddit asks, lawyers at Reddit, what was the best gotcha moment you ever experienced? Lady got into a minor fender bender with a truck in a casino parking lot. She backed out of a spot into him. My guy said she parked and went inside the casino for a few hours. At her deposition, she testified that she was so hurt she went right home and to a hospital. I asked if she was a frequent visitor of casino and if she had a rewards card. She was happy to tell me she did and she had gold status and showed me the card. I subpoenaed her rewards card's records and it showed she was playing slots for hours after the accident. The first case I ever did. Opposing counsel misplaced the copy of my client's driver's license. Rather than admitting his mistake and asking me to resend it, he filed a motion to compel, claiming we never sent it. While I was able to provide proof that we'd sent it to him like 8 months ago. So the judge was rather displeased with his antics. Represented a DUI client who swore up and down to me he hadn't been drinking or doing any drugs. Newbie officer who had his field training officer with him in the car. Rookie pulls client over for a tag violation. Walks back to the car with body camera still on. Training officer says get him out for a DUI and the rookie says but he's not intoxicated, to which the reply was do it anyway. Body cam clicks off. Turns on 7 minutes later and they're doing field sobriety exercises on my client. Client sat in custody for 3 weeks until I finally got the tape from the prosecutor and presented it to the judge. The oh shit looks from the prosecutor and FTO when the judge saw the tape. I'll treasure that one. Judge wrote the police chief a letter saying the FTO was dead to him and he'd deny every search warrant he tried to bring thereafter for being a liar. Client is hopefully still on track with his civil attorney in a lawsuit. I was suing a landlord who failed to make serious repairs in order to force the tenant out. The hard part is proving bad intent instead of mere idiocy, so you get higher damages. Code enforcement was involved, so I request those records. The landlord left a voicemail to the enforcement department saying to hold off on the fines. They will make the repairs as soon as the tenant is forced out. That was an easy case. My brother is an attorney. He had a case where the guy said he was permanently disabled from a work accident. At a deposition, my brother overheard the guy talking about getting his house remodeled. He was already spending the money he thought he was getting. My brother drove by the house to see how much work was being done and saw the guy carrying bundles of roofing shingles up a ladder to the roof. This was before smartphones, so he drove to a Best Buy and bought a video camera. Went back and recorded the guy. He had copies made and sent to the other attorney. The guy dropped the suit and was back at work the following Monday. My brother's client didn't want to pay for the video camera. He saved them thousands of dollars. They eventually paid, but he still gets a little peeved when he talks about it. I had client whose $60K car was ruined by a shop that put in the wrong oil. We couldn't prove it at first. The engine blew up. Oil leaked out and evidence was lost. I subpoenaed their bank records. Figured out they bought their oil from Costco. Called Costco and got their prices for the last 2 years. I then worked out the amounts they were spending. Did some backhand math. And showed based on the values it was impossible they had ever bought the right oil. They settled in full immediately. Not as exciting in the moment as some other ones here. But we hired a private investigator to track our defendant in a fraud asset recovery case. The private investigator returned with a photograph of torn pieces of paper that clearly constituted a ripped up note, albeit in a foreign language. I happen to know said foreign language, so pieced it together and realized it was a letter written by the defendant raging at his accomplice for making highly specific mistakes that fucked him over in the context of our fraud asset recovery case. Obviously, we later had this verified and sworn to via affidavit by an official translator. It was unbelievable, the handwriting was a match. Plus, he'd also signed it. And the contents were so specific, contained information about specific amounts going into specific trusts under specific names, that it was basically a smoking gun. We almost thought they'd planted it to throw us off. But the guy was just stupid and arrogant. Ran into a bit of a fight admissibility, but the letter ultimately helped us receive a significant settlement that made our clients extremely happy. My client was a woman working at a meat packing plant. Her glove, they would only give her the loose kind because they were cheaper, got caught in the machine and she lost her arm. We sued the owners of the plant for the glove issue. We also sued the machine manufacturer for failing to include the required guard. Then we sued the distributor for being in the chain of the sale but didn't really think they played much of a role. The manufacturer swore they included a hand guard and said the plant owner must have used a grinder to take it off. During a deposition of the guy that owned the distraction company, he shows up with the sale documents he was supposed to have turned over weeks before. Turns out there was a note in small print at the bottom he didn't know about that said the sale was without the hand guard, which is against the law. I pointed it out and we ended up settling that afternoon with the distributor. The woman got all her medical bills paid, got money for a prosthetic and got a bunch of pain and suffering damages. In a protective order hearing, a respondent admitted on cross that he choked his partner. His attorney looked like his head was going to explode. The judge still only granted an order not to abuse. He wouldn't grant the stay away or any other relief we asked for. Go figure. I was deposing a guy in a large breach of contract fraud action. I asked him if he'd ever been convicted of a crime. He said no. Later in the dep I asked him the question again and there was no objection and he answered no. I then whipped out his indictment for felony fraud and his conviction for misdemeanor conspiracy and he denied it was him until I started asking about his co-conspirator, his son, and then he gave me the "oh yeah, I remember something about that." I was representing mom in a bitter custody fight. Dad wanted full custody and argued mom was an unfit parent. Mom wanted full custody because dad had a history of domestic violence towards her and the kids. Dad's lawyer was doing a good job of painting her in a bad light during his cross-examination. And I was starting to get worried. His lawyer brought a close family friend as a character witness for dad, who said the usual nice things about dad. Then he said something about them owning chickens. I thought that was odd, so I asked more questions. I was able to get the friend to spill the beans that the dad owned chickens for illegal cockfighting. And he'd take his minor children to these cockfights. And when the children were acting up, he'd punish them by forcing them to feed the chickens, during which they would get pecked and scratched by the chickens. And obviously, the children were terrified of those chickens. I could see the color draining from dad's lawyer's face. Mom got full custody. My client's house burned down from an explosion in the fuel oil tank used to heat the house. It was clearly the oil maintenance company's fault. But his homeowner's insurance, from a very reputable company, still refused to pay out, citing a ridiculous technicality in his policy. Essentially, the policy covered damage caused by the oil heater, but they claimed that it was the storage tank that exploded and wasn't part of what was covered. So they deny his claim, which was about 1.2 million. And then I get involved. During a deposition with the claims adjuster, I ask how she came to the conclusion that the storage tank was not a part, or at least connected to, the heater. She states that she relied on her expert witness who was an engineer. Little did she know I had already checked this person's background. He had zero engineering experience or education. As most of you might know, you don't get attorney's fees in most cases. However, when an insurance company denies your claim in bad faith, now you do. Her little admission cost the company about $500k in fees, on top of the original claim for $1.2 million. I acted for a plumber who ripped up a tile floor to replace a pipe. He installed new tile on top but warned the owners not to walk on it for 48 hours. He emphasized not to let their kids or their dogs walk on it either. They walked on it but alleged the defects were caused by improper install. We had an expert do a report which confirmed that it was consistent with proper installation but people walking on it too soon. Crazy homeowners still went to trial on it. In their evidence disclosure they included a series of pictures. One of the pictures had in the foreground a tile that was tilted upwards. The background very clearly showed a dog's paw pressing down on the other end of the tile. That wasn't so much an I got them situation as they got themselves. When I was a prosecutor I had a guy who was representing himself. He was charged with car theft and evading. He was actually able to escape the cops for quite a distance and was captured later. His defense was that he wasn't the person. I got his calls from jail and he talked so much to his girlfriend about how he had committed the crimes. The look on his face when I told him that I was providing him copies of his jail calls was great. Edit. I remember an even funnier thing. I had another guy who was representing himself. It was a residential burglary and one of the elderly neighbors saw the defendant running from the house. At trial, the defendant was cross-examining the witness and he asked, "Now when you saw this person running away?" And the witness said, I saw you running away." I served on a jury that was deciding a medical malpractice case. The plaintiff's common bile duct was cut during a gallbladder surgery, a risk she was made aware of beforehand. She was suing the surgeon who performed the operation. The plaintiff's lawyer called as a witness a surgeon who had performed this surgery thousands of times. Speaking from this breadth of experience, he told us this mistake was entirely unacceptable and something that no competent surgeon would do. The defense lawyer got up and grilled him for a while to make it clear that this guy made bank by traveling around the country testifying against other surgeons. Right before he sat down, the defense lawyer said, "By the way, have you ever cut the common bile duct during this surgery?" The case was decided, and the jury all but burst out laughing when he answered, "Yes, I have." Not the lawyer in the story but the client fighting an unemployment claim my employer caused to be denied. We had a phone hearing that the employer didn't show up to, so I won based off that, but they appealed saying they had video evidence of misconduct, so we had to go to an in-person hearing. They didn't show up to the first phone hearing and had to explain why they didn't show up, and they said I screwed up and didn't open the letter you sent us, and my advocate, who's the lawyer, eyes just went oh as she slowly cocked her head to look at how profoundly stupid it was to admit that. We proceeded with the rest of the hearing and they never showed their video that basically just showed me eating lunch on my break and watching Netflix. That wasn't even the best part of it all. My advocate tore my employer to pieces and made it clear I was terminated without good cause. The company was actually trying to slowly get rid of its office to hire overseas for support. Talked to a few people after I was let go and slowly things like people and desks started disappearing and they started hiring overseas. I was involved in a patent dispute years ago that was basically large company going after small company. Not only did the judge decide we didn't infringe on the patents, but he then went on to invalidate the patents due to prior art we were able to show. My favorite was a proceeding that actually led to disbarment of the opposing attorney. Opposing attorney was sent discovery requests that he never responded to. Multiple emails were sent and nothing. Moves to compel and the attorney shows up furious that we file a motion and are wasting the court's time. Says we're playing games and claims that he's sent multiple emails and we aren't responding. Opposing attorney produces emails that supposedly show he's been begging us to respond. After looking at the produced emails and then looking at my calendar, we see that the date and the timestamp doesn't match the day and the timestamp. Turns out the attorney doctored an email he prepared last week and changed the date but forgot to change the day. Judge was furious and chewed him out about professionalism and ethics for 15 minutes. Meanwhile we just sat quietly. It was actually uncomfortable to watch. This idiot then gets angry at the judge and tries to say that it was his IT guy's fault. Lying is an extreme no-no for attorneys. Our legal system depends on us being honest. He was disbarred later that year. My only full trial. Contractor ripping off my client who was no saint. I went through entire contract where each sub was listed and he agreed to each line as being part of contract. He agreed that amount was to be paid to the subs. He agreed to the total. What he failed to do was list any profit. My last question was, where is your profit in this contract? No answer from him. As written, he was working for free. Case dismissed by judge without me having to present my side. Most of mine are my own clients admitting the crime to police but not realizing it. So it's less gotcha and more time for a plea. Oh, I thought I was still driving in the parking lot when I put down my phone. Yeah, that's the charge too. There was no weapon. I'm the weapon. Well, there's no way I was going speed. I was only going other speed well over the limit, etc. Someone told me this. The lawyer was describing the theft. The footprints make it seem as though he didn't go to the basement. And the defendant said, actually we did. not the lawyer, but happened to my father-in-law. He had a lucrative commercial construction business and was ready to retire and sell it. He got a buyer and part of the deal was receiving a portion of the profits for several years. Somehow, the company had no profits, but there was all sorts of evidence of wealth. New cars, etc. The new owners slip up. He kept on the head secretary, who loved my father-in-law. She gave dad the information he needed. At trial, the new owner was on the stand. Nope. We're really just struggling to break even. Dad attorney asked, what is this corporation? Before there was an answer, the buyer's attorney literally jumped up and said, Your Honor, we would like to discuss a settlement. New buyer started a second company. Dad's company was buying the supplies, and new company was getting paid. It's called cooking the books. Plaintiff had an x-ray of an allegedly broken arm. It seemed off to me and the dates didn't make sense. I was in-house at an academic medical center. I looked at the case more closely and discovered the plaintiff was a x-ray tech at another hospital. After that, it was all over. Never posted this before. Ex-wife, X, trying to fight ex-husband's new girlfriend, NG. NG is in her car trying to flee while X is beating on car, blocking escape, and grabbing at door handles to get in. But doors are locked. After X briefly moved out from the path of the car, NG begins to drive away slowly. X, noticing the car starting to leave, dives onto the hood of the car. Full stop. Full stop. Slides off. Gets run over at slow speed. And breaks bones. Several surgeries later, X sues NG, alleging negligence in hitting X with the car. As I'm deposing X, she claims to have never touched the car before it hit her, never punched or kicked the car, never broke the windshield wipers, never grabbed the door handle to try to open the door, never dove on the hood, just yelling. I asked what NG was doing during this time, and X describes NG as deer in headlights, staring straight ahead, locked in her car, both hands on the steering wheel. How did you know the doors were locked? That one got dismissed pretty quickly. Edit. Videotape deposition 2. Made sure that one was recorded. I was trying to get a restraining order for a woman in DV court from her son's father. We are presenting testimony and she details a story where he grabbed her arm and slammed it on the tub, breaking her wrist. On cross, I asked the accused if he ever broke my client's wrist on purpose. His response, fuck you, I did. She was 9 months pregnant, about to smoke crack and wouldn't stop. I tried to grab her arm to get the pipe and protect my unborn son. Fuck me. She left that detail out in her conversations with me. Plaintiff alleged he was so injured in an auto accident that he couldn't work, do any regular activities, or pick up his young kids. He then posted on his public FB profile him doing the ice bucket challenge. If you're not familiar, he basically lifted a huge cooler filled with ice water over his head. His attorney had no idea he had posted it. Perhaps not my best, but it was recent and pretty good. I represented a guy whose car died in the middle of the freeway at 4 AM. He put his hazard lights and called 911 for help. At the same time, an LAPD cop, heading to work around the same time in a police unmarked car, was driving around 87-92 miles per hour. Deconstructionist. He doesn't see our guy, strikes him and causes a major 6-car collision, including overturning an 18-wheeler truck. Police arrive and take photos. LAPD officer claimed our guy did not have his hazard lights on and he was only driving 60 miles per hour. He was trying to put some of the fault on our guy. At the deposition of the investigating officer, she doesn't remember if our guy's hazard lights were on or not. Attorney bring photos from the scene. One of the photos showed my guy's hazard lights on. We were dismissed shortly thereafter. Not so much a gotcha as it is a defendant giving themselves up. When I worked for insurance defense, I handled a fraud case where a man reported his Rolex as being stolen. He was adamant that he was at a hotel and it was stolen. He has shown no proof of being in a hotel, so it's flagged. We go through the whole process and finally reached depositions. He gets sworn in and eventually let out that he wasn't at a hotel but rather with his mistress and he had left it at her house. His wife noticed he didn't have it on, so he immediately claims it must have been stolen etc etc. This man decided to hire an attorney and go through this whole circus just so his wife wouldn't find out about his affair. Needless to say, the claim was denied. Had a client accused of leading the cops on a high-speed chase. The cop on the stand estimated he was going 90 miles per hour, but never actually clocked him. Then the cop identified where the chase started with me and where it ended. It lasted about 2 miles. Then we went through his log of when it started and when it ended. About 3.5 minutes. Once you walk through the math on that, the average speed of this chase was 35 miles per hour. Client got acquitted really quickly after that. I lived with a guy when we were in our early 20s. He worked for one of those shitty furniture rental places where people without money get furniture. Much of his job was repossessing furniture. And in his spare time he was a skateboarder. He severely hurt his back on the job and they were contesting paying his bills and settling. At one of his mediation dates, they revealed they had hired a private investigator to follow him. They showed him pictures of himself at a skate park skating when he was supposed to be home recovering. They asked him to verify it was him. He said no. These diffusers had somehow missed that he had a twin brother that also skated. They eventually settled for what I thought was a very low $70,000. He had back pain for years that caused him to gain weight and suffer. In his 30s he finally had back surgery and he regretted not doing it 10 years earlier. He said it completely alleviated the pain. That's all for this video. You made it to the end. If you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing so you know when the next videos are released. Thanks for watching. Have a good one.